So, well, we will just welcome everybody and we'll go round the house. What's that phrase? Round the house and mind the dresser. So I'm going to start with who I see on the Brady Bunch screen in front of me. So OJ, you're on my top left. So if you want to shoot.
Hi, OJ MacDonald, CEO of the Association of Town and City Management.
Karen.
Karen Shields, Membership Manager for the Association of Town and City Management.
Laura.
I'm Laura Blake, the Public Affairs Assistant for the Association of Town and City Management.
Right, Richard, his chair is there at the minute, but we'll jump over to Lisa.
Lisa Grant with Waterford County, responsible for City Town Centre Management.
And Gillian.
Gillian Elliott, Town and Village Manager, Cosby Coast and Glens, and ATCM NI.
Neville. You're on mute, Neville.
One of the great phrases of our time. For Mana and Omagh District Council, and responsibility for Omagh Purple Flag.
And Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor Conley, Bid Manager for Drogheda Town Centre.
And Gail.
Mid and East Antrim Borough Council, so Town Centre Development for Ballymena, Carrick, Fergus and Larne.
And Jerry.
Hey folks, sorry, I realise I'm off video here. Hey, I'm Jerry Farrell. I'm the Director of Operations for Dublin Town, and I'm also our Purple Flag Coordinator, and I'm an assessor as well for my sins.
And I'm Gail, and I'm from the Sligo Business Improvement District, and Purple Flag Town and a Purple Flag Assessor. And Richard runs Dublin Town with Jerry. I think that's everybody, OJ. So if you want to jump in.
Yeah, fab. So I have prepared a few slides like I do for most meetings, just to set the context. So the theme of today's meeting is the path ahead. Let me just
like your pick, OJ.
Can everybody see that properly?
Yeah.
Yeah, see fine.
Fab. The path ahead. So welcome everybody to ATCM Ireland. It's the first time we've met as a group in a while because of the pandemic, and there's lots to discuss.
OJ, you haven't got it on full screen, your slides.
Ah, I knew it. Hang on. Let's try again. I'm going to apologise if you can hear kids in the background as well. So the way of the world. Is that better? Fab. Yeah. Okay, so in the last couple of weeks, we had some major announcements coming from the Irish government, and that is the relaxation of COVID restrictions with a timetable under what's called the Recovery and Resilience Path Ahead plan. So this plan kicked in from Monday this week with some small changes, and there is a timetable going through pretty much into June, looking at the various phases of relaxation. Now, we don't have a timetable for everything, but we have a timetable for quite a few things. So obviously this follows what has been the most disruptive year, at least since the fallout of the financial crash back in 2007, which was particularly bad for Ireland. To be fair, COVID has probably been even more disruptive than that. And to give you an idea of how disruptive it's been, GDP is believed to have fallen by 5.4% for Ireland during 2020. Once you take away the issue of multinational corporate activity, which flows through Ireland, but does not actually reflect the real situation for the domestic sector. So for the Republic of Ireland, COVID has been a challenge, as it has been right across ATCM's network. I've been looking at this particular article done by the Irish Times, which talks about the businesses that have just simply not survived the pandemic, a mix of chains and independents across the country. whose shutters will not be going back up again. It's fair to say that some of them may have been challenged anyway because of the difficult circumstances for modern day retail, but the article makes quite clear that some of the businesses have closed as a direct result of COVID. And one thing we've noticed from areas of our network where reopening has already happened is that sometimes you don't understand the full fallout until restrictions are relaxed, places are allowed to open, but some shutters just remain closed. And it's only then you start to get an understanding of the true impact in terms of vacancies in a town because of the restrictions. So the plan as it stands from the Irish government. So on Monday, we had the return of inter-county travel, organised gatherings outdoors can resume, non-essential retail in terms of click and collect can resume along with outdoor retail. The return of personal services like hairdressers have reopened by appointment only. Various attractions have been able to reopen as well, galleries, museums, cultural attractions, and public transport capacity is able to increase back to 50% of normal. So that's all stuff which took place on Monday. Next week is a big one. So this coming Monday, there's a big one for Ireland. That is the return of non-essential retail. So all retail will now be able to reopen from Monday onwards. That completes phase one. In terms of phase two, we have from the 2nd of June, the return of some hospitality in the form of hotels, bread and breakfasts, guest house, self-catering accommodation can reopen for guests, and they are able to serve those guests in terms of their leisure facilities, but they must be for guests and residents only, not for people who are not staying overnight at that accommodation. There is also from the 7th of June, the return of outdoor services for hospitality limited to groups of 6, and also the return of gyms, swimming pools, leisure centres, but for individuals only. So if you're planning on having a good workout with a group of people, can't happen. It's individual visits only from the 7th of June. Here's the bit which is uncertain. So higher risk activities for now remain on the back burner. We're not sure exactly when they are going to reopen. The Irish government is considering, will consider opening from the end of June and understand where we are from a public health point of view and make the decision for when these sectors can open, possibly later in the year. That includes indoor hospitality like restaurants, bars, nightclubs, casinos, indoor team and group sports, mass gatherings, so that's the big events, and also international travel, something which I'll return back to because that is quite important. Preparation is underway, however, for the safe reopening of cinemas and theatres, expected to be June, subject to public health advice, and the piloting of live events in Ireland is also being considered. So events from arts, culture, sports, and live entertainment. Those pilots have already started to take place in England. I hear the Welsh government is also now considering pilots, and we expect some announcement on this in Ireland soon. For those that don't know, there is now additional business support available. So for businesses who have been able to get COVID restrictions, support scheme money, they will now be eligible to collect restart week payments to support the costs of reopening. So that cash, that support is now available. Now, of course, reopening has already started to take place north of the border. So just in terms of the latest north of the border, because in terms of how this might impact people's decisions on where they go across the island of Ireland for various services, it does have an impact. So Northern Ireland has already opened its non-essential retail, already opened its close contact services, outdoor hospitality, outdoor visitor attractions, self-contained overnight accommodation, leisure facilities like your gyms and your swimming pools for individual visits. They've all already opened. and it's been relatively well received. There's been a lot of positivity when it comes to reopening. And we heard from Karen Clifford at Belfast One in a recent session of High Street Conversations around the sentiment for Belfast businesses on reopening. And it's been good. It's generally been really positive. In terms of what comes next for Northern Ireland, so this still, I think, is yet to be confirmed, but it is penciled in. That is the reopening of hospitality indoors, with some restrictions still in place, but it will be a move from the outdoors to the indoors, which I think for a lot of the hospitality sector will definitely be welcomed. The opening of the remainder of tourist accommodation, reopening indoor visitor attractions, and the resumption of indoor group exercise and training. So that's an indicative date. I have heard there is pressure on the Northern Ireland Executive to open hospitality a little bit earlier. I think some are pushing the executive to go for opening on the 17th of May, which will mean it will be in line with England and Wales in terms of reopening. I think the executive is due to make a decision on that today, so I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. What we have heard in the past, literally the past 2 hours, is that an indicative date has been put in for the reopening of theatres in Northern Ireland. So that is the 21st of June. Not confirmed yet, not absolutely certain, but that is what we're hearing, 21st of June for the reopening of theatres. So just before we finish for a group discussion, I think we have to talk about the visitor economy when it comes to the island of Ireland, because we know how much tourism is a driver for the economy, and certainly in terms of even in the nighttime economy and hospitality and leisure, it's absolutely critical to understand where we stand with the visitor economy. So meetings are ongoing with regards to the return of international travel. As part of the G7, which took place recently, transport ministers have been discussing the return of international travel, and they themselves are under pressure to agree some form of common travel standards which will allow for its safe return within a framework which everybody can understand and is consistent for people wherever they're traveling to and from. Now, in the UK, there are moves to sort of move forward with relaxing some of the restrictions around international travel. From the 17th of May, we got confirmation that both England and Scotland will remove the stay in the UK regulation, and that international travel will be allowed to restart. And that will be governed with a new traffic light system, which will dictate what type of restrictions will be in place depending on the type of country someone is traveling to, with obviously those on the red list facing severe restrictions and quarantining and testing and all the rest of it. The green list at the moment is extremely limited. I think there's 11, maybe 12 countries on there, including places like the Faroe Islands and New Zealand. So it is really limited. There is an opportunity for the island of Ireland here, because travel from Great Britain is exempt under the travel light, the traffic light system, due to the common travel area. So all that pent up demand across Great Britain is likely to go somewhere. And what we've heard in terms of a lot of travel firms and the business they were seeing building up for this summer, a lot of that seems now to have gone by the wayside because of there being so much uncertainty around the uneven rollout of the vaccine globally, and the use of this traffic light system and the imposition of quarantine. There are a lot of people who are now cancelling their summer holiday plans. So there is the assumption there that people will want to go somewhere, and if Ireland is not subject to the traffic light system, what might this mean? But it is not free from challenges. It is not free from challenges. There are still complications due to rules and travel guidance which exist across Ireland, whether it's Northern Ireland or the Republic, such as, for example, right now in Northern Ireland, it is still the case that travel international travel has to be for essential purposes only. And obviously, south of the border, there are still issues around the strict quarantine arrangements in hotels for people entering the country. And then there's also competition now emerging in terms of the staycation market. So Northern Ireland has now just launched its Holiday at Home campaign, looking at that staycation market, but the competition is going to be very stiff. Different cities across the UK are going with their own staycation visitor campaign. So everybody is going to be looking at the market across the UK and Ireland in terms of the visitor economy, which will make things a little bit more complicated. There's lots to discuss. And also, I think one of the reasons why the guidelines and the rules on entering, say, the Republic of Ireland, for example, from Great Britain, will probably remain pretty tough for now. And you can completely understand this, is that I've heard very recently in the past few hours that some parts of the UK are subject to surges in cases because of the Indian variant of COVID. So that is something to bear in mind, because that could well dictate how this all plays out. But for now, first things first, the visitor economy might be something we discuss for another day, but first things first, what's our experience for those places and those sectors that have opened, and how is the preparation going for those places and those sectors that are yet to open? That is the main topic for today. So Gail, on that note, I'm going to hand back over to you.
Thanks, OJ. Look, I think for those in Northern Ireland, obviously we're 40 miles from the border, and it's going to affect all the border counties. Trevor's on there as well, who's actually even closer again, is that cross-border, because Northern Ireland are ahead in their reopening than what we are here. And even, OJ, if you look at the date, the hotels only open up on the 2nd of June, and we have no date on restaurants and pubs and gastropubs and all those, and cafes. You know, like we're just so far behind and there is that concern, I suppose, for that cross-border traffic. Trevor, do you have any indication yet as to whether, I'm not getting any sense here at the minute. Do you have anything on your side?
In terms of from Drogheda, there's very little cross-border trade or activity happening in relation to where I'm living in Monaghan. There is a sense of people even last weekend booking outdoor dining in Armagh and Fermanagh. You know, basically Monaghan, if you know your geography for Ulster, Monaghan juts up right into it. We have Armagh, Tyrone, Fermanagh, all within, 5-10 minutes drive. I could be in home in 25 minutes, 30 minutes. So there is cross-border trade happening in relation to that at this moment in time for Monaghan, not so much Drogheda. None of the businesses have been speaking about that at this moment in time.
Do we want to go around and kind of everybody see how you're, because this is our first week of, we were mega excitement here on Monday, even though it's only limited at the moment, but there's lots of our businesses are putting up promotional activity of deliveries coming in and getting ready, and Trevor did an absolutely fantastic reopening video, which I have no difficulty in saying we plagiarized very and got a great response to. And in actual fact, both of our feedbacks was that it was the emotional response from our shoppers. But interesting, having looked, and I think it was Derry and some of the Primark stores in the UK, where literally the queues were around the building. Pennies here in the Republic have done it by appointment, and so they're averaging 65 in-store per hour, and they're opening from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and it's actually getting really good feedback from shoppers. and also the per basket purchase is a multiple of about 3 or 4. So once they're in, they're just getting everything they can before they come out the other side. So their sales are holding quite well, but we haven't had that queue around the block at all. So you pre-book your appointment and you show up 10 minutes beforehand, and you're in one door and then you come out on another street the other side. So, but very positive feedback because I think half the country was running out of socks and essentials and all those sorts of things that you miss. But very positive. And I think the alleviation of stress from particularly the retail sector and the hospitality sector coming swiftly after it. Big push in Sligo at the moment and we've been circulating our own newspaper articles to work to get cooperation, and we are getting it here in Sligo from our local authority for additional footprint outside hospitality venues for tables, chairs, heaters, umbrellas, and obviously the grant system has kicked in the purchase of those, but consideration for businesses that heretofore would not within a million years have been given consideration to go outside their front door. We're challenged, as we all are on the island of Ireland, with our narrow streetscapes, because most of us are, a couple of 100 years old, and so we weren't built for unless you had public realm works. But it is actually going to be interesting to see how it changes the movement of people around our streets, because there's obviously going to be more outdoor street presence than there ever was before this.
Well, one of the things on that, so the design guidelines that were issued through by Fáilte Ireland, when they're talking about the pavement widths, like you've raised that item in relation to our heritage towns, our streets are narrow, bar the main street in Drogheda, which is maybe 15 meters wide. The rest of them are 6 or 7 meters wide with footpaths that might be less than 2. And the design guidelines are telling you that you need to keep a clearway of 1.8 meters. So there are definitely challenges there in relation to that outdoor dining aspect. And then the other thing that we're getting as well in relation to Section 254s is the differentiation between the wet pubs. Hate that name, but anyway, the wet pubs and those that are serving food. And even yesterday, I got a response where I was told that they need to have a kitchen within their premises to avail of the grants. So I don't know whether that's the same response that other people are getting.
You have to have a kitchen on site if you want to get the grants. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's not. Now we have a couple that are working cooperatively. We've got pubs that are drink only that are working with neighbours, and they're working their food order from their neighbour's pub, and they seem to be working quite cooperatively in that. So that's how they're getting around it.
Yeah, I know that at the time when the previous lockdown and you had to sell food, and they were trying to clamp down on that one of people organising to have pizzas delivered or whatever it might be. But we're lobbying hard with Fáilte Ireland on the basis that the traditional pub has been closed for 14 or 15 months at this stage. But the thing is, they are what we'll need for the tourist business when it comes back. But like if you're looking at some of those very traditional 19th century pubs, they were never built with a kitchen in mind, and you're not going to get planning to basically rearrange the interior of them either. So I think it's an own goal not allowing those pubs to avail of the grants. It just makes no sense to us.
There's an exemption for the 254 license in the Republic at the minute for the canopies. So we have a couple of pubs that are taking advantage of that. We've actually got one pub that has the canopy up that everybody looked the other way, and we're telling them, go get your license this year because that exemption might not be there, and it's a retractable canopy just in a very narrow laneway. But the irony for me, Trevor, is the guys who designed that toolkit for Fáilte Ireland are the guys who are doing the public realm works in Sligo, and we have narrow streets. So I don't know what they weren't looking at that they would put that into the toolkit.
when I was looking at the pictures, they were all of wide streets, and I was just thinking of the likes of the Kilkennys, the Ennises, the Droghedas, these different traditional towns, heritage towns that were narrow.
Is that coming from fire brigades? Because I know that's been another issue that we've had here, where the fire brigade is saying they need 3.5 meters and all this kind of stuff, which is ruling out an awful lot of the narrow streets. Now, I know Cork got around that by saying basically, if you can demonstrate you can remove all your on-street furniture within 90 seconds, that that would suffice. And the staff would have to be trained to move the furniture within the 90 seconds. Now, we've been pushing for Dublin to take a similar approach for our folks, but it might be the case that that might be the expectation that you got wide streets, even though it's not. Most of our towns are medieval in design, but that might be the thing. And again, it might be something for us to lobby on, just in terms of practical reality.
Yeah. Here's a curious one, and the fact that there's so many from Northern Ireland on the call is absolutely terrific. I have been wondering, because OJ, you had brought us through the slides of air flight travel, and so we had business booked, group business, tour operator business booked, coming from the USA. They were due to come to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade in 2020, right? Groups of 350, cancelled, right? Bumped over automatically to 2021. Because who thought that this was going to last as long as it did? And what I'm trying to find out, both from Fáilte Ireland, from the US market, but also it will be relevant to that group business within the UK, right? So inbound group business, did it, once it went from 2020 to 2021, did it hold then in rebooking to 2022, or have we lost a huge chunk of business there that nobody is seeing yet? So I've asked Fáilte Ireland, and I don't know who the counterpart, but that would be a really interesting, because that's volume business. And so I've also contacted our Transport, Tourism and Coach Council network here in Ireland as well, to see if they can get a read as to what bookings for 2022 is like.
So just, I mean, it's difficult to talk about specific scale, but from what I understand from travel firms is that the demand is there, and the demand is big for people to travel, and it is building. The only problem is the uncertainty of when it's allowed to return. So whether it's travel firms we've spoken to, or those people within visitor economy, such as I think in a high street conversations session, we had a presentation from Visit Kent in southeast of England, and everything we've been told is that people, whether it's domestically or internationally, are desperate to travel, and they're desperate to take the trips that they've been planning for months, and it's there. It's just a case of when they're allowed to do it, whether it's to see friends, family, just get a different take on scenery, because people have been stuck at home for so long. It's there. It's just it's a case of when rather than if.
But they're called, I was a tour operator, so they're called frequent individual travelers. So they're the fit group. So I'm talking about the 3-day, 5-day, 7-day, 11-day tour groups. So we would move a number of million around the country. And that's what I'm trying to get a sense of. Did the business that we lost in 2020 that absolutely rebooked for 2021, that tour operator does not know whether they're going to stay and rebook to 2022, or whether they're going to go elsewhere, because the uncertainty, it's just, we're not out the other side of this yet. And particularly for us, we were in a pilot project with Fáilte Ireland that focused on the US market, but I can't get a sense one of the people in Fáilte Ireland has said that they're getting a sense that we've lost that business from the UK. They've gone elsewhere. So that for us would have a big impact.
That's probably something that could be looked at as a joint, the way Tourism NI work in partnership with Fáilte Ireland, and maybe that's a question that both ourselves here in the NI section and yourself, Gail, can put the same question in. And I would be very concerned as well in terms of, because of the close relationship, you know, most tour parties, if they are coming over, even if it's for, take golf, for example, they do go north and south of the border.
Yeah, they do.
And I do know that they, from just anecdotal, that in terms of the big groups that had booked 2020, 2021 have rebooked for 22. But it would be good to get some actual hard facts on that in terms of going forward. So I think that's a question that we should both be asking.
I might follow up a bit, because the port of entry for coming across the coastal causeway and down the Wild Atlantic Way is Northern Ireland for us. So and then they either go that way or they go the other way and down through Dublin and down into Wicklow. So it's a hugely valuable port entry for UK coming across from Scotland and from England. So I really think it would be good to know. I'd happily follow up with you on that.
Yeah.
That sounds important. I mean, one of the things I'm considering for ATCM is that a group of the sort of next phase of all of our virtual sessions should probably be focused around visitor economy, as that is we're starting to see more clarity in terms of what happens next, and it's especially for Wales, Scotland, and the island of Ireland, it's so critical to local economies that I think it is something that deserves a specific focus. So, you know, if there is an opportunity for us to get organisations like Fáilte Ireland and Tourism NI involved, then I think we should. And I think we should have them around the table. So if Gail, Gillian, and everyone else, if that's something you think we should look to do, then just let me know, and I think we should have that deeper discussion around visitor economy.
Yeah, cool. That'd be great to know. Has anybody else, I know Dublin have done additional pedestrianisation. I don't know about Drogheda, but I just see the questions up on the side there for timed closure. It's really interesting in all through COVID. I now call it Bollard Gate is what I'm calling our pedestrianisation here in Sligo. That's BOLLARD, not the other bold word, but Bollard Gate, because our people here had such a reaction. You would think that the world was ending because we put in extra space with a couple of bollards along a street. Like, seriously. And I see the coverage that Dublin is getting for the additional pedestrianisation, and it's fantastic. We don't have those options here. So again, it's not really a solution to the streets to pedestrianise those places. It's just a nightmare, but I've never seen a population so sensitive to a change to a streetscape. It's such a reaction.
Just on the temporary road closure thing, Gail, most of our pedestrianisation, and the council are always at pains to point this out, but even Grafton Street and Henry Street, they're pedestrianised from 11 a.m. onwards. So there is vehicular access, mostly deliveries, obviously, from kind of 5, 6 a.m. Till 11, and that's the case with the streets that are being done in Dublin as well. So, you know, Dame Court, William Street, all these different places. The other big issue, and you know, Richard can expand on that, is we have car parks which effectively have almost exclusive use of the street now. So someone described South William Street, which has the potential to be a really attractive pedestrian street, as now being part pedestrianised or creating a 300-metre long exit ramp for a car park, which is effectively, it's a 400-metre long street that 50, 60 metres are being pedestrianised post 11 o'clock. and the rest, the carriageway has to be left clear because there is a single car park exiting onto that. So there's all these sort of compromises, you might call them, but being made basically to try and keep everyone happy. And look, we have the same thing. We have a lot of more traditional retailers who are convinced that you need people in cars parking very, very close to you if you're going to make sales. And there's a little bit of tension maybe between them and some of their business neighbours who are in hospitality. So, and look, we're pushing for more pedestrianisation. A lot of the stuff that is coming in now is stuff we've been lobbying for and pushing for, even to trial it for about 5, 6, 8, 9 years in some cases. There was like places like Mary Street and that. So I think it's a great test bed. I personally think most of it is going to be quite successful and will maybe make the case for greater pedestrianisation in a few months' time. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, like, what Jerry said there, like when like 10 years ago, the majority of our members would have been very opposed to pedestrianisation. But it's something we've been tracking, and it's now just over 2/3 are in favour of pedestrianisation. But there's a very hard core of people who really believe that if you can't drive your car right up to a till, you can't buy a pair of socks. So we've done a lot of research in this with the public, and the public, by factors of 4 and 5 to 1 or more even, want to see streets pedestrianised. And we did ask, in relation to the specific street that Jerry was just talking about there, before the pandemic, we asked, we did some research and said, if the street was pedestrianised and you couldn't get to your car park of choice, what would you do? So 40% said they'd just go to a different car park. About 28% or 30% said they'd actually use public transport. Another large cohort said they'd park and ride. It was only 17% of people said they wouldn't actually come to the city, that they'd actually go out to, they'd go to one of the out-of-town shopping centres. But when we looked behind, and Red Sea did this research for us, but when we looked behind the people who said they wouldn't come in, we found that half of them weren't actually city centre customers anyway. They quarter of them hadn't been in the city for over 2 years. And the other cohort were people who had very negative things to say about the city and why the city, wasn't the place they wanted to be anyway. So it was, for us, this was really categoric in terms of where the future lies. So we took the decision last year that we would favour pedestrianisation to allow for outdoor seating, outdoor queuing, and physical distancing on the street, so that customers didn't feel that they were confined to narrow footpaths, for example. So we made that decision at board level that this was going to be our policy, and we have had some kickback. We have had the angry phone calls, but not nearly as many as we would have imagined previously. So and I think there were last summer as well some trial pedestrianisations, and the footfall went up, and the quality of the footfall went up as well, because the other thing that we've picked up from research is that the people who are most inclined to favour pedestrianisation are your ABC ones. They're the people most inclined to have to be climate aware, and are actually, a lot of them are actually actively looking at their own lifestyle in terms of their own carbon footprint. But the more educated you are, the more you're likely to earn good money. So the people who are earning the most money are the people who are most in favour of pedestrianisation, which is interesting. If we were having this conversation in 1985, it would be quite a different conversation that we'd be having in terms of the spending power of people in cars or people on public transport. So for us, as Jerry said, this is the future. And the other thing, and you have to be kind of careful about saying it, but we're going to have less retail in our towns and cities. Those big brands that have gone bust or pulled out of Ireland or pulled out of the city, there aren't a queue of new entrants lined up behind them. to take those spaces. So we're going to need different uses, and I think we're going to see more hospitality and more entertainment, and therefore, you know, those businesses are probably going to be most interested in having more pedestrian streets. And what we're saying is not pedestrian streets; it's actually pedestrian zones. And the final thing I'll say in terms of the profile of businesses, you know, we began roughly 10 years ago. And we started looking at this 10 years ago, and basically there wasn't a business owner under the age of 30 who didn't want their street pedestrianised, whether they were retail, hospitality, or anything else. The under 30s wanted their streets pedestrianised. They're now the under 40s, and in 10 years' time they're going to be the under 50s. So I think there's a degree of inevitability that we're going to see more pedestrianisation. And actually, conversation with a lot of our members is how do you repurpose car parks, you know, to something more constructive. And we've actually had a conversation with with people in the Car Park Association about using car parks as taxi hubs, so that we can free up curbside space for outdoor dining. And that's a conversation that they're actually interested in having, which again I just think points in a certain direction in terms of how we're going to be using the city and the transport modes that people are going to be interested in using.
Yeah, it's similar to a conversation that's been had across the UK, especially as in I think just about everywhere in the UK we had the return of outdoor hospitality during last summer. So this question of temporary pedestrianisation was something which played out fairly big. And everything Richard said is right. I think that there is this growing group of people that are perfectly comfortable with pedestrianisation, and the loss of retail as well, most likely in favour of other uses, is only going to play towards that, whether it's leisure and entertainment or whether it's housing as well. I think all of it drives towards pedestrianisation. What we did see in the UK, though, was that there is still those people against pedestrianisation are especially vocal and especially difficult, and that still remains. So we've had instances across the UK whereby things like traffic cones and signage and temporary bollards were put up to warn people that roads were closed, and businesses would go out onto the street and physically remove the barriers themselves. We've had a bid manager in one big city in England actually lose his job over the issue of pedestrianisation, because the bid was keen to move forward with pedestrianisation, and he, on behalf, I think, of a small cohort of businesses, resisted, and that turned into something which was quite messy. But for a lot of our members, they are pushing, they want to use the opportunity to get something done. Things like schemes like, I'm thinking of the Brixton Playground, where they do have challenges with lots of car traffic. They want that pedestrianisation to be permanent. And the tagline for it is quite a clever one. It's, if not now, when? And the majority of people are all up for it, but there is a small minority who aren't just against it, but particularly vocal and particularly difficult when it comes to the issue of pedestrianisation. And Gillian, I know this is something you've an issue you know about quite well as well, given your experiences.
I suppose, yeah, I think pedestrianisation, and this is the opportunity now to actually get some pilot schemes in place. But I think the focus, I know the focus that's coming back to me from businesses and retail and hospitality is, let's just get everything open, really lobby to get everything open at the same time. The tagline that's being used in Northern Ireland now is, the high street's not open until everybody's open. And, you know, they both complement each other. You can't just have retail open and not have the full hospitality open. It just doesn't work. And even just to get the visitor back on board as well, you know, you can't have even, you know, just staying in a hotel if you can't have all the facilities that are around that as well. Like, I mean, we just don't have the weather to have permanent outside hospitality. It's just not feasible for us. And again, coming back to the pedestrianising of our streets and our towns and the way our towns are laid out, it would be quite difficult to look at some pedestrian areas. I know the few areas that we've been looking at, they're so small that it's not really viable because the local population still want their main street to be open to traffic. We have the problems as well in terms of delivery vehicles. Our towns are designed in such a way that there are no back entries into any of the shops. Everything is taken in through the front door. And that also has the knock-on effect in terms of residential within towns as well, and the new regulations that are there in terms of fire safety, environmental issues, bins, all the rest. You know, it all plays into that, and it all plays into the structure of our town. So I'm very interested in the work that Alison Harvey is doing in terms of looking at our historic towns and our heritage towns and how they can adapt to the new world, basically.
Can I just add something? I went through a huge, painful pedestrianisation project when I worked in Middlesbrough, and you know, we ended up being it as a public inquiry. The Deputy Prime Minister ended up being the person that actually made the decision as to whether this was going to happen or not. So I didn't even know people like bus spotters actually existed, the same as train spotters. I've never seen so much opposition to something in all my life, and we ploughed on with it as an idea, and we eventually got to where we needed to be. That road closure only closes for 6 hours a day, 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. All deliveries and things go outside of that area, so they have 18 hours a day. And yes, we had to battle with Debenhams, we had to battle with Next and a Tesco Express and all those deliveries and all the litter and the rubbish collections. But eventually we got there, and just after, about a year after, people couldn't even remember what it was like to have traffic down there because it was such a usable space. Now, there was something at a call I was on the other day with somebody, and they actually said that open spaces are going to be the new anchor stores of our towns. People aren't coming in for those big retail things anymore. Those big retailers aren't going to be there. The retail landscape has changed, and it is going to be about those open spaces and how we actually present them. And I thought that was an interesting comment that they made, and it made me think about the experiences people have in town centres and the spaces that we actually have and how we look after them. And it sort of lends itself a little bit to that side. But I get the narrow roads and I get the narrow pavements because that's a nightmare to deal with. You know, it might not be suitable for your particular, there might be little areas that might be, but it might not be suitable for your location unless you had one-way traffic and you'd shut a lane or whatever. And that's a huge exercise, traffic modelling and stuff like that. But it's certainly something that's worth looking at.
Karen, just say that phrase again. Open spaces are the new what? I missed the last bit.
Are the new town centre anchors.
Yeah, this is it's something that came up in a recent session of High Street Conversations we've had.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, in the wake of the loss of obviously we've seen Debenhams and Arcadia Group almost in the same week announced that they were disappearing from high streets across the UK and Ireland. We did a session, I can't remember, I think it was our Welsh group, our Welsh network, wanted us to explore in detail what that meant for town centres. And we had a 3-part session of High Street Conversations on it. This is where I think it's Marie Hunt from CBRE Ireland joined us for one of the sessions to discuss property, to discuss what the loss of anchor stores means. And essentially the old model of having a huge department store or retail store performing as your main anchor, your main footfall generator, simply doesn't work anymore because of the various ways in which we can engage in retail without needing to rely on physical property. So any town centre which is relying on retail to be its anchor is in trouble. And based on various schemes which have used open space, green space, and based on something coming forward in, I think it was Stockton-on-Tees in the northeast of England, there is this feeling that actually there's lots you can do around things like green and blue infrastructure, which do genuinely attract people, especially families, because it's space they want to be in, it's space they want to use. and it's great for well-being, and it's great for dwell time. And if you are able to integrate that some way within a town centre or a city centre, if you have the space, if you have the ability, then it is something that can massively drive up footfall, and it seems to make sense. I do know there was a scheme in, I think it was Newcastle, where they used artificial green space within part of the city centre, and it was incredibly attractive for a good portion of the community who wanted to use it, and it was a big footfall generator. So it's this idea that when we look at replacing anchors, it isn't like for like Richard says, a lot of that retail isn't coming back. We need to rethink how we see anchors going forward, and it might be that green and blue infrastructure and open space, and things like that, which are great for community uses, is possibly one of the alternatives we look to.
Yeah, if I can, just to totally agree with what OJ has had to say there, but what I thought was really interesting, Hampton are working on a huge planning submission. It's going to be for 5.5 acres in the centre of the city. And I thought it was really interesting that they had actually included green spaces and dwell spaces, taking out what would have been traditionally store space to create those recreational spaces. And I thought, okay, this is thinking for the future, because certainly if that plan had been put in even 10 years ago, there would have been, a number of large floor plate stores in those spaces. There's no way they would have forgone rent over a couple of floors. So I think, if a developer like that is putting those ideas into a plan, I think it has to be the future, and it can only be done. It would only be done if there had been plenty of consideration and research as to how space is going to be used.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting, and the Stockton example. So it's there's a number of components to it which are all really interesting. So part of it is the fact that they've got 2 shopping centres in Stockton. The council, I think, owns both of them, and what they're going to do is, because of the increase in vacancy rates, they're just going to knock down one of the shopping centres completely, not replace it, move all the businesses into that excess space in the other shopping centre. The shopping centre that they're knocking down actually sits on the riverside. It blocks the access to the river. So they're just going to open all that space up so people can engage with the riverside. They're going to clean up the river. And then in that space as well, that's where they're going to locate their urban park. And it looks fabulous. It looks fabulous. And I remember, I think I was talking to Karen about this. I was like, I didn't think lots of green space could work in the middle of an urban centre, to which she shot back at me, have you not been to New York? have you not understood Central Park? Which, yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And there is so much evidence out there that suggests where the sort of grey has turned to green in urban centres, it is a footfall generator. It really is a footfall generator. People prefer that kind of space to dwell in. So it's interesting.
I think as well, the interesting part of their development is the retail is quite sporadic. So it's spread over 2 centres with lots of vacancies. Concentrate it all in one area, so you have a vibrant area with hardly any vacancies, and release the other area. So you still have what feels like a vibrant area, although it's smaller. We all know that our town centres are too big. So it's smaller, it's more condensed, it's still got that personality about it. But then you've also got this huge parkland that, this open space that will take you down by the riverside, which is quite an ambitious project that's obviously costing an awful lot of money.
Is this the place that the council have built a hotel, the Hilton Hotel?
Yes.
Is that the same
Yeah.
place?
Yeah.
That was really progressive because I actually sent that on internally in here, and because the way they connected the high street to the river, they're really opening up a huge expanse. And for us, like who are still going to hopefully access EU money, it is smart and green, and well, I should say it is green and smart in equal. And so everything that is put forward now has to have that additional open space, that additional greening. And I think, Trevor, you had circulated something, this notion of play back into town centres and family involvement. So as Richard said, what was 10 years ago is now no longer. And for what was 18 months ago in terms of outdoor dining, is now being considered. And as one of my hoteliers said the other day, he's fed up of everybody talking about that outdoor dining is going to be the solution because we're not the Bahamas. So, and we don't, particularly over here, we're in a bit of a battle at the moment over covered space because there has been funding allocations for the adaptation of cover in the public realm. And we're meeting resistance, not from our local authority, but heavily influenced by their consultants that they've engaged, who keep citing Bournemouth as an example. And the examples from the southeast of England, we're like a hair's breadth away from the Atlantic Ocean with 224 days of rain a year. It's not going to be the same experience, and it's not going to be the same climate conditions.
Totally agree. I mean, I'm in the northeast of England, so we've got the North Sea and everything else. However, in saying that, the December before the lockdown, I was in Denmark. And it was bloody cold, but we were sitting outside and we were drinking and eating. And it's a cultural thing, I think, as well. And I also think that a lot of the time people don't wear the right clothes to sit outside because we're not used to it. And I know that sounds really strange, but, I've got a phrase that I use with my scouts. There's no such thing as bad weather, there's just bad clothes. Because you need to dress properly for the occasion. I think we haven't got used to that bit yet.
Yeah.
We're used to sitting outside. We are in the summer. We're used to sitting outside, but there's nothing wrong in cities like, in Paris and places when it's raining on the streets, people are still drinking coffee under a canopy.
Yes, well, but it's interesting that the influence is and I just got an email earlier this morning. The influence is heavily coming from the consultants who are not listening to the operational issue of how the businesses need to work. And we have our planner stuck in the middle who's deferring to the consultant.
Yeah, go back along. I mean, I was sat in a coffee place the other day, and they put those blankets on the seats, and yes. I dragged the blanket over and I put it over my legs because it was drafty. And my friend said to me, "I feel like an old lady with a blanket on." I said, "Isn't that strange? Because I feel continental with my blanket." And I thought it's just a mind shift, isn't it, really? It's getting used to something different. But it was actually comfortable. I had my coat on, I had a blanket on my lap, I was drinking a coffee and it was fine, and I just think there's that, I don't know, I think people might adapt to it a little bit more, especially if you have like a little canopy, or you're able to put like a canopy out so people could get a bit of shelter. But I think the temperature and things like that can be dealt with.
I think it's overcoming all those hurdles that you just talked about there, Karen.
Oh, yes.
I know in terms of getting an awning up, getting permission to have a pavement cafe license.
Yeah.
All the investment that needs to be made, it can put an awful lot of people off, and the timing as well. I think whilst all the things we're talking about are really valid, sometimes, me personally speaking, in terms of local government, we just don't do things quick enough for the business consumer or the businessman, in terms of getting all those permissions in place. But if we could knock down as many barriers in terms of getting these structures and ideas in place, I think that would really help. But as you say, it is a cultural thing. But I keep coming back to, I think the real focus that we need to do in the next few weeks is really lobby to get everything open at the same time, both north and south, in terms of that immediate path ahead. We can't do those steps until we get that in place, I think. That's just, it's just a bit of a bugbear for me at the minute. I just want them to have dates. I know there's indicative dates coming up, but I've been sort of watching the screen as well to see if there has been any announcement, because I know they were wavering here in Northern Ireland as to what the date would actually be in terms of all that hospitality.
Could I just ask if any that we have two grants, and this adaptation of coverage to the public realm. One is 250,000 and one is 200,000. Within the Republic of Ireland, has any of the guys, like Maureen, I see, Maureen, if you're there, did Waterford do anything with the 250 or the 200, or Trevor's bounced to another call, but he'll be back. But I'm just curious if you guys did that, and if you're aware of what your council has done in Dublin to use that. The 200,000 strand is a competitive process, and our council are in the design phase for that at the moment. They're going to cover, actually, we've 2 sun traps in our town centre, and they're going to put the cover over one of the sun traps. So it's a really interesting conversation we're having with them at the moment to put cover over a sun trap. But the other one on the 250,000 is urban animation. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody on the call who has a local authority that has drawn up anything or identified an area.
Plans are underway, Gail, for both of those schemes in Waterford. There's 2 separate subgroups. There's one sort of overarching committee, and then separate groups looking at proposals and how best to maximise what we can do with it. And a loose plan has been prepared. We've kind of loosely gone back to Fáilte Ireland and said, look, is broadly speaking what we are thinking of. Are we going in the right direction before we invest a lot of time and energy into doing such a thing? And I'm not on the second committee, but I am on the outdoor dining one. So we're getting reasonable steer. I suppose it's our SEO that's dealing with it directly, but we are getting a reasonable steer that we're going in the right direction. There are some works to be done to negotiate with the businesses who will be supporting the individual thing. Now, looking at Waterford, back to your heritage, small little narrow streets, back to a compact city, we're looking at maybe a couple of clusters rather than, one, using maybe the Viking Triangle as an area and having a cluster of businesses in that, and Culture Quarter or other things. So looking at clustering areas so we can cluster the relevant businesses and then come to some arrangement with those businesses to support, and like on a day-to-day management of whatever goes in, we need their support for that. We're still at proposal stage. I imagine that will be going to the management team, the council management team, next Monday. So we should have, again, more of a final steer on where we're going with it. Costs are rocketing up, though. When you start pulling all these pieces together, trying to manage the costs as well is one of the things that we're watching. The team that are looking at the urban animation one, we're looking obviously at having overlapping like that to complement each other. Similarly, as I said, Waterford is a compact city. Nowhere is more than 5 to 10 minutes walk. So we're concentrating on our main pedestrianised areas. Naturally enough, we're going to build on what we have.
It would be really good though if we did get to kind of build up a bank of what everybody did under those schemes so that it would inspire, because I think it's the criteria for the 200,000 one has to be creative and inspiring and culturally appropriate, and so throwing a triangle of stretch canvas is probably not going to cut it. And it's compounded then by the areas that they're looking to put them into. And I don't know, I'm trying to remember for the assessment in Waterford whether you had, like we've people living in apartments over our main hospitality thoroughfare by the river. So putting up cover, you now are up at the top, the roof level, which you're now getting into the tricky area, blocking sunlight into the apartments that are above the businesses. So it just seems to be, as Jill and I said, it just seems to be a never-ending list of we need to get over this hurdle and this hurdle and this hurdle and this hurdle, and yet the deadline for the 200,000 one is the 27th of May, which is right. Next. So, and you don't want to make a decision in haste that in case it doesn't work its way out. But so sometimes I think when funding streams like this are released, the actual stuff that has to be logistically solved on the ground would nearly take you 6 months, and you've got, you know, a month to get your submission in. So everybody is scrambling. But I do think at the end of it, we should try and put all those designs and stuff together, because I think that's what's inspiring when we get together in conversations like this. Is like, I was really inspired by Stockton, that a local authority has a management company and owns a hotel and generates revenue of it. You know, and the way that they have opened up their riverfront, and more importantly, the access from their main thoroughfare to the riverfront is now only a stone's throw away, whereas it was cumbersome and didn't look the best before. So I think the inspiration is what we kind of, I really enjoy when we share inspiration with each other, because we leverage that into what we want to get done.
Sure.
And I think that's a huge benefit.
We have experienced some of the similar barriers. We do have a certain amount of residential population within our areas. We have to be mindful of that. We also have to work with those community groups. One of our difficulties is closing date of the 27th of May. A possible reply from Fáilte could be, presumably, give it a month, and then delivery and lead-in times. And part of these schemes, as there's minimal guidance really as you're going through the process, but by the time we actually get something in place, we could be indoors again. But the outdoor space will continue to be needed, and we're trying to look at, you know, multifunctional uses and trying to be as without being bland but being broad, and looking at the identity, the cultural maybe identity of each area, little cluster area we're looking at. So yeah, it isn't an easy process, I would agree. So any shared learning, any best practice documents we can get out of it would be very valuable.
Yeah.
I see a conference or a study tour in Stockton coming up.
Sounds fab. I haven't seen it. Let's go and have a look.
Where I live.
Well, according to Twitter, there's not much change in Northern Ireland. 24th of May, outdoor gatherings up to 500 people. 31st of May, competitive outdoor sport. 21st of June, theatres and concerts reopen as long as they're properly risk assessed, as well as conferences and exhibitions. So we're not getting the green flag that we were hoping for.
Oh dear.
As far as OMA is concerned, you know, anywhere that can put a couple of chairs out on the pavement or wherever, that's what they have done, but it's woefully inadequate. And for the effort that's required in terms of operating, the rewards are really very diminished. There's been a big difficulty re-energizing staff, getting the old staff back in again. They have all moved on to driving delivery vans and things like that. And I don't think I've ever seen the whole hospitality sector as down in the mouth and with absolutely no vision for tomorrow. There's no light at the end of the tunnel at all. And it's very hard for us in terms of, as local government, to know what is the best way forward in terms of encouraging. What has been said is quite right about retail. That's changing. Primark still, we've had to employ, we've put some of my colleagues out in yellow coats and made them COVID marshals because of the queues that we're going into. Some of you will know Primark has been about the only place that has really brought the queues, but on the second or third day that has gone away. And meanwhile, there's no opportunity in terms of that greening. I spend a lot of time up in the North Coast. I look at what's Coleraine as an example of a pedestrianised town and the way that that has developed. And I think there's great opportunities there in terms of sensitively using pedestrianisation in a way. But I'm also very conscious in terms of spending a lot of time over in Oxford, that some of the places that have been pedestrianised, when the businesses close up in the evening, they become a very sinister place in terms of gangs of people floating about and drinking dens and things like that. So all of this requires, I think, a very, very sensitive move for change. Sligo is amazing. The Glass Hotel in Sligo is lovely. It's one of my favourite places to go down to. My sister's lovely house in Ross's Point, and we spend a lot of time down there when we can. But there's just such a challenge, and it's not one size fits all. But learning together is cathartic and useful the whole time.
Can I just come in on something Neville said there, because he's actually brought up something which I haven't mentioned yet, but it is really important, and I think his point is spot on regarding hospitality. So I'm not sure how many people on the call managed to join us for the Purple Flag Forum meeting on Tuesday. I'll get the recording out for that meeting as soon as possible, but in that meeting we had contributions from an organisation called the Restaurant Collective, Brew Coffee, which is a franchise operation of cafes across the UK, the British Beer and Pub Association, and the Nighttime Industries Association. And every single one of them, it was like they'd coordinated this beforehand. Every single one of them said there is a massive challenge when it comes to employment across the various sectors they represent. The Nighttime Industries Association had even said that, based on a survey of people who had been on the job retention scheme in the UK, the furlough scheme, 70% of them weren't returning. 70%. So there's just a massive challenge, and I think a lot of it centres around concerns with regards to job security and having found something else, and just not wanting to put up with that uncertainty anymore. And so there's a lot of businesses now getting really hesitant and concerned about full reopening. I think we heard about it was a restaurant which has 6 outlets. Not all of them are able to open on the 17th of May when indoor hospitality is meant to return, because they just don't have the staff anymore. They haven't got the staff to be able to fully reopen. And from the sounds of it, it is an issue which was consistent right across various sectors. So for those with hospitality still to open on, I'm thinking specifically about the Republic of Ireland, this is an issue to keep your eye on, is staffing levels for your hospitality and leisure businesses, because it could be problematic.
Yeah, we have had that, OJ, from quite a few businesses, that staff during particularly the last lockdown, for reasons of job security, but also while they were out of work, the PUP, as we call it, your furlough scheme, while the payments were generous relative to social welfare, it was less than people would earn when they were living or earn when they were working. So they took alternative employment, and they're not coming back. So it is an issue, and we have heard from businesses that they'll be working on scaled back hours on the basis that they just don't have the staff and can't get the staff to fill those fill the hours that they need.
Yeah, that sounds like a massive challenge.
I think it's to do with security as well, because they've been through a turbulent time of opening, not knowing how long the furlough scheme, are they going to get made redundant, and a lot of people have left and tried to get some sort of security.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Karen. That's what we've been hearing, is that people wanted more security, and they were out on furlough, they were back, then they were out on furlough, then they were back, then they were out, and the third time they just said, I can't hack this. And funny, kids still think that they should be fed even when mum and dad are out of work. So
Another pay now for those kids.
it's a funny, funny that.
Selfish.
But also in terms here of Brexit, with people from Eastern Europe have gone back home again, and they're not, the numbers aren't there that were working in the hospitality industry, and for some reason young people who are unemployed or wherever see that type of work as beneath them, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, agree on both of those points. I think it's fair to say, and I've talked about this before, culturally, in terms of how we view jobs in leisure and hospitality, they're not always necessarily seen as career jobs, sometimes seen as stepping stones to something else. My first job was in hospitality, but it was a way just to earn a bit of money to pay for university. It's attracting people can sometimes be difficult, and it's especially difficult when it's a sector which has a disproportionately high amount of people from foreign countries working in it, when the UK as a whole decides to withdraw from the EU, which means issues in terms of employing people from across the EU, which has created an extra challenge across the hospitality industry for the UK. Now, it's a lot of these things converging at once. And I know we haven't talked about Brexit much in this particular meeting. It's difficult to tell what issues we are suffering as a direct result of Brexit because of COVID just being all consuming. But I have no doubt that that is an issue as well.
Well, one of the Brexit impacts that's trickling through our construction industry at the moment is an increase in construction cost, in material cost, and the example I was given was house insulation has gone up by 30%. So we have a housing shortage here in the Republic, and yet in the Ireland 2040 document, there's an ambition to double our town population from 20,000 to 40,000. And for new builds to start to accommodate that population, which is where everybody wants to get to, it's cost prohibitive at the moment. The east coast of Ireland, even though it's only 2.5 hours away, is far more attractive to a developer than the west coast. And so I think there's layers upon layers of complexity. But I'm delighted, Neville, you were on the call today, because the next time you're down in Ross's Point, you need to drop into the office and see me, and we'll have a walk along the river and have a coffee. Wouldn't that be something? Mask free and have a coffee and a chat.
No, I love Sligo. I think it's a lovely, some of the wee pubs and the chowder you can buy and everything is gorgeous in there.
Neville, just make sure you put your woolly jumper on.
Nah, I'm never without it.
Well, look, I would like to I'm just conscious of the time, OJ, if you don't mind, I would like to follow up with OJ and Gillian and just see if we can get into that volume business area within travel. And it really is it's from the UK across into Ireland, so it's our inbound. But also it would be interesting for is there any data from, because it's a huge movement of people on these group tours, and particularly as having had somebody who's had to order 20 coaches for the French when they used to play the rugby matches in Dublin and do a 3-day itinerary across to Galway and back out again. It's economically, a boon to an area to get these volumes of business, and particularly dependent. And most of our hotels' occupancy would have a building block, and they'd have an allocation set aside to cater for this particular business model. And I just can't get a read at the moment as to that cancelled business. Did it bump again or has it gone? And for the UK, it'd be your European group business that'd be on the move. And where did that go to? Because we're not all staycationing. And it's a misnomer to think that it's, active retired, because the active retired with the Active Retired Association is now 50 plus. So they're a very mobile midweek movement of people, let alone the fact that, and for those of you who have convention centres, the whole business tourism conference side as well was another reliable business model that we were dependent on here in the west of Ireland, and that too has shifted. And as much as I love these meetings and everything, I think that we're going to end up no more than our working situation with some sort of a hybrid for business tourism, which is the conference space, and as well as our work situations. I think that's going to evolve into a hybrid model as well, and that will have an economic impact. We average almost 1,000 conferences a year, from 10 people up to 800 people, and nobody sees it. The hotels book it, it just comes in, the delegates come out, they spend, and we don't even have a convention bureau. So it's a hugely valuable piece of business that I have no sense as to where that business is going, and I'd hate to think that they'd all end up virtual.
You know, Gail, I was only reading an article, and I must try and dig it out and I'll share it, but about a university lecturer in America talking about how in the intervening year he would usually have done whatever 6 or 7 international conferences. He had done 0, but he was framing it in a climate emissions point of view, that, you know, how many thousands of miles would you have traveled, and he was comparing it to previous years where he'd spoken in Australia or Singapore or something like that, and basically, well, that's X amount of carbon miles created. So I think a lot of, even just the traction it got on social media, a lot of people were talking about that. Well, you know, why would we do this when we can all, now obviously there are huge other benefits, and there's social and networking benefits that are kind of hard to quantify of having a physical conference. But I think that is definitely going to be part of the conversation. It might be slightly different where, you know, we're taking a short hop over to Birmingham, or people from the UK coming to Dublin, but especially the larger international ones where you're bringing over maybe folks from the United States. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at the emissions as well as the cost and other practicalities.
Well, if you were to look at all our towns and cities between the UK and Ireland that would have hotel, like we've 1,000 rooms. We're only a small town, but we've 1,000 bed nights, and there's 2 building blocks that have just kind of are in flux, and we don't know what will happen in 2022. Let alone the domestic, either the frequent individual traveller who'll move, or the domestic visitor on a staycation who'll move. But so normally a hotel will have about 4 or 5 building blocks of different types of businesses they'll be putting through at any given time. There's 2 that just are sitting out here in the grey space. So it's an interesting, it's going to be interesting to see the economic impact of it. And that's the other thing as well, is for your business tourism delegate, the disposable income spend is 4 times that of a leisure visitor. So that's huge. So I do think it would be really, it'd be proactive actually to try and get a read and a handle on it between Northern Ireland and ourselves.
That makes perfect sense. Let's try and get representatives then from both nations who can provide the insight then for the next meeting. So I think what I'll do, Gail and Gillian has had to jump off, but I'll speak to you both and we'll get an agenda together for the next meeting, which can be a joint Island of Ireland meeting, and we'll discuss visitor economy and all those points you've just made about business visitors. I've not even fully considered that. We talk about moving to the hybrid model for office workers, but thinking about it in the context of business visitors, that's really important. You know, I would be one of them. I would have been traveling here, there and everywhere. And now with Zoom, am I going to be doing that same amount of traveling anymore? Probably not. So it's definitely.
The only thing is, for those of us who are in ATCM, we'll always be exempt though, because we'll have to physically walk the place. So that was going to be my
study tours. Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking my travel, the time my travel will remain is when I get to do study tours around some cool places, like as Neville says, Sligo. So that's the thing I'm going to be keeping.
And let's not forget the chief exec of Zoom the other day actually admitted he was all zoomed out.
Yes.
I think that's something for anyone organising a conference though, is that we have to show the added value of being in the city, and I think that's on all of us as, you know, want to use that placemakers term that we say, well, you're not just coming to a convention center, you're coming here and you're going to see, you know, the hands-on, the practical sort of stuff, and not just for town center management, but for any industry. I think we have to see, what does the place, what are you selling in the place that isn't just a convention center and a nice hotel?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Challenge for all of us, I suppose.
Fair point.
Okay.
It's all a conference now, OJ in Sligo.
Yeah, I'm happily to volunteering. I'm volunteering. I'll have the first session organised in the next 30 minutes in one of the that Neville was in.
Fine by
Anyway,
me.
that was really good, guys. And thank you for taking the time today. It was really good to catch up with everybody. And as much as I love seeing you, I hopefully the next time I don't see you in this format. Hopefully we're moving towards a place where we'll be able to see each other face to face.
And hug.
And hug. What is the word that Boris Johnson said yesterday? It's some type of hugging. I heard it on the news before.
Word.
He's describing the hugging. It was not careful hugging, or I heard it 4 times.
Unrestrained, no? Unrestrained hugging?
Restrained hugging.
Unrestrained. Unrestrained. I think he said unrestrained. Was it unrestrained?
No, he's some word as in don't go full on into the hug, but just, you know, some sort of
light touch.
Yes.
Light touch hugs.
Oh, Boris.
Oh, bless
Gotta
him.
love him.
Mental capacity.
You can go to Israel for your holidays if you want.
Huh?
Yeah.
Israel's on the green list. You can go there for your holidays.
Yeah, I just want to fast forward 6 months, and I'm just going to Google this now because it's bothering me, guys, because I heard it described 4 times. Okay, hugs to be allowed. Okay, just bear with. It's either this or I call you all at 4 o'clock in the morning when I remember the word you used.
Well, hang on, we're waiting now with bated breath.
Cautious hugging.
Cautious hugging.
Cautious hugging.
Cautious hugging.
You're allowed cautious hugs.
I don't even know what that means. Sometimes I think Boris is just.
Do you think Boris knows?
I'm not sure he does.
No. Okay, folks.
I wouldn't know what I know what a cautious hug is, but you can't be going in kind of going, no, you can't do that because it's a cautious hug. I can only do a cautious hug.
Cautious hugging with panicked calmness or something.
Anyway, guys, thanks a million. Thank you. Bye.